Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Stacy Smith. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager for North America at Gnosis by L.O.V.E, and the co-chair of the Mentorship program here with Gina Benninger to explore a topic that resonates deeply with so many of us, navigating tough workplace relationships. Gina, would you like to hop in and just introduce yourself before we move on? And then I will introduce our talented speaker for today.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I am the Director of Business Development and Marketing at Nutrients and also the co-chair. I get to hang out with Stacy and all of you today, and we're super excited to get started with Erin.
Yes. So I wanted to just let you guys know this conversation is really an important one. Workplace relationships, especially difficult ones, can affect not only our productivity, but also our well-being and, of course, our sense of belonging. So by learning to communicate across differences, we can create healthier and more supportive environments where everyone can thrive. So without further ado, I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Erin Neal. Erin is a communications strategist and an opinion columnist with the Montreal Gazette. She works with mission-driven organizations to help them tell their truth, build trust, and communicate across differences. In both her consulting and public writing, Erin highlights the emotional undercurrent of communication, how the words that we use and what we leave unsaid shape our relationships, our confidence, and the choices that either propel us forward or quietly hold us back. Her personal mission is support healthy kids, courageous mothers, and strong families, which guides her work as a writer and a strategist. First, we have a few housekeeping items. I wanted to let you guys know we're here for WIN, and I wanted to talk a little bit about our vision and our mission. Women in Nutraceuticals envisions a thriving nutraceutical industry where women are equally represented, empowered as leaders, and recognized for their contributions across every level of the value chain. WIN is dedicated to empowering women in the nutraceutical industry through leadership development, mentorship, and research initiatives that advance gender equity and professional growth. We have some core values that we want to talk about real quick and highlight that leadership, of course, a growth mentality, investing into your future, into yourselves, and of course, opening up opportunities by helping you network and gain knowledge with a great community. And one more last housekeeping slide. We do have these webinars on demand in the portal, and you will see them being released through our social media. So just keep that in mind. You do have access to all this information at all times so that you can see previous webinars as well that we've offered. So thank you for using that portal. We appreciate it, and it's there for you. All right, so welcome, Erin. Um, one more thing here. We have, again, on demand, of course. This webinar will be in the member portal as well. We do have a Q&A at the end of our webinar today. So please make sure that you enter your questions so we can ask our talented speaker today, and use the chat as well. We are going to have a few surveys and a little bit of conversation here today, so have fun with it. All right, so again, I will welcome Erin. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to turn the floor over to you, and it's kind of difficult for me to say this without singing it, but please tell us exactly what love has to do with it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I often sing the song myself when I'm talking through this framework as well. So thank you so much, Stacy, for the lovely introduction. It is such a pleasure to be here with y'all today. I've been very excited to have an opportunity to sit and kind of chat and talk and answer questions and to share the love framework. So as Stacy shared, I hope that there is interest from everyone who's participating today to respond to a couple of polls, as well as a few additional prompts during the time that we have together. I also hope that over the course of the next hour, you all can see yourselves in some of the information that I'm sharing. And hopefully there is at least one thing that you take away from our conversation today that you find is helpful in managing a tough relationship, a sticky relationship, whether that is with someone that you're working with professionally or someone that you're engaging with in your personal life, because the advice that I'm going to share is really applicable across all relationships. So workplace friction is the topic of the hour, as you all know, and I'd actually like to start us off with a poll. So can we trigger that first poll? And all right, so it should pop up on your screen. So that first poll is, when it comes to workplace friction, which scenario feels most familiar? Are you someone who is comfortable with confrontation and is willing to air grievances when they arise? Are you someone who's a little more reserved and perhaps shy and kind of keep that information to yourself? Are you like me and you're a bit of an overthinker and, seeking solutions, but then at the end of the day, sort of maybe brush it under the rug and think that everything is fine? Or might you be one of the individuals that perhaps is causing a little bit of tension on your team? So I'll give everyone just a minute or two to take a look at that poll and to log their responses. We've got some feedback coming in here. And if folks are feeling shy, that's okay. Stacey, how are we doing on responses? Okay, wonderful. All right, well then, yeah, maybe let's go ahead and show some of those results. All right. So it looks like a lot of people sort of fall in that third category of really thinking deeply about the situation and how you can potentially resolve the conflict, but at the end of the day, maybe you feel like it's not worth it. I totally understand that, and I very much appreciate the honesty in this room. And it tells me that we are ready for a good conversation and hopefully a couple of laughs along the way. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So just give me 1 second. All right, hopefully everyone can see that now. So, as was previously shared, my name is Erin Neal. I'm an opinion columnist with the Montreal Gazette, which is where I've been based for the last 10 years. I'm also a communication strategist for mission-focused organizations. And I often bring up this joke that my husband says that I have a special gift for telling people what they should do and how things should be done. And thankfully for me, my work as a writer and a consultant lets me do exactly that. So over the last 20 years, I've worked with mission-driven businesses and nonprofit organizations to help them use communications to share their truth and then also to build trust across differences, which is one of the things that Stacey highlighted when she first introduced me. I'm particularly interested in the emotional undercurrent of communication. And so, again, that's thinking about how the words that we choose, as well as what we leave unsaid, can either accelerate our growth or potentially hold us back. And so today I'm going to show you a simple and honest way to navigate some of those difficult or sticky workplace dynamics with more intention, with more clarity, and as well as with more impact. Okay. So this is another opportunity for you all to engage in the chat. If you could drop a hand raise emoji, and if you've ever felt stuck at work, but perhaps not because of what you had to do, but rather who you had to do it with. Let me see if we get some chat responses there. When we talk about career development, we often discuss scaling, right? Scaling our growth. We talk about scaling systems, about scaling strategies, platforms. We even talk about scaling our mindset. But sometimes it's not the process that holds us back or that slows us down. It can actually be the people. So you could think about it like the decision maker who requires perfection before they'll green light whatever your next step needs to be, Or maybe it's a collaborator who you deliver something to, and then behind the scenes, they kind of rewrite your work and there's no real explanation. Or maybe you're a manager who, or you have a manager, I should say, who might praise you in private, but perhaps doesn't necessarily sponsor you in public. Or perhaps relevant for this context, maybe it's a volunteer or it's a mentee, and no matter how many times you encourage them, maybe they are failing to take the next step to advance a time-sensitive project. So I would expect that that experience is familiar across the board, regardless of where on the business ladder you may sit. So whether you're an early career professional or you are a senior leader. But the thing is that these challenges are not just workplace quirks that we can really kind of ignore or sweep under the rug. They are, in fact, growth blockers, and they're not solved by managing your time better. They're actually solved with better communication. So I'd like to drop in another poll, if we can get that poll number 2, which will ask, what do you find most difficult about navigating workplace relationships? So sort of following up on that first poll, are you more challenged about having to speak up when something feels like it's not right? Do you find that maybe you might take things a little more personally than perhaps they're intended? Do you have trouble asking for what you need in order to do and better in your professional position? Or do you find that you're maybe harboring some frustration around work styles of your colleagues that perhaps don't move with the same speed that you do? All right, and then I'll let, okay, I was going to say, let you all choose this. Okay, all right. So this is great. Thank you for everyone who has responded to this. So we're going to address each of these challenges in one way or another through a series of anecdotal stories in just a moment. But I want to first address what really gets us caught up in each of those situations. So one of the biggest traps that we fall into at work is assuming that we're being clear about the things that we need and the expectations that we have for ourselves and for other people. And that's particularly true when we're interacting with our peers, if we're connecting with volunteers and team leads, or in mentee-mentor relationships. And when something feels uncomfortable or difficult, or maybe even a little deflating, it really is the thing that pushes us to stay silent. And so instead, we hope that the person will read our body language. Maybe they'll pick up on our behavior. And if we're really lucky, they'll read our mind. But when nothing changes, we wonder, what is wrong with them? Why are they not getting it? And working with people who operate differently than we do is inevitable, right? We can't avoid it. And honestly, avoidance is not a growth strategy anyway. So instead, we have to put in the effort to build stronger relationships that support the work, that supports the work, that helps to build our team, and that ultimately reinforces ourselves as professionals. So how do we do that? How do we do that without losing our minds or perhaps our momentum? That is where the love framework comes in. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a simple and really honest way to help you navigate some of the messy real life dynamics that may not show up in your job description, but ultimately shape how the work gets done. So I'm going to walk you through what each letter means and offer some additional context around each of them and examples to help you put them into practice. But before I do that, let's drop our next poll. So I'm curious to know which of these options you might believe the love framework stands for. Oh, so I had the poll up, but it just disappeared for me. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'll give you all a minute. So are we thinking about being loud and outraged and feeling vindicated and maybe being a little explosive? Or are we lurking and overthinking and maybe vanishing a little bit, maybe running away from the challenge? Are we listening? Is there an opportunity for ownership, visibility, and empathy? Or are we looking at loud opinions and vague expectations? And again, Stacey, feel free to show the responses when we've gotten a good majority of folks. All right, 100%. That's right. Everyone selected the right answer. So C is the actual framework. Let's start our next slide here. All right. So L is for listening. And again, I will go into a little bit of detail for each of these things, but at the highest level, L is for listening. So thinking about and taking notice of what is working, not just the things that feel deficient or the things that are missing or the things that feel challenging. O is for ownership. So that means taking ownership of your perspective, taking ownership of the role that you play and any tension that you might be feeling in a particular situation, but also taking ownership of your power, because even in challenging relationships, you have power. It's just about taking a moment to find that power, to understand it, and to get the courage to use it. V is for visibility. So paying attention to who's taking up space and who perhaps is not being heard. And then E is for empathy. So giving grace, seeking clarity, staying curious, and being thoughtful about your curiosity over critique. So now I want to break it down or begin to break them down. And I want to explore the first part of the framework, listening, through a scenario with a person that I like to call the Gilded Guide. So maybe you have worked with this person. It could be a mentor or a manager who sprinkles please and thank you like glitter, but always follows up with a critique. Their goal in their mind is to encourage, but unfortunately, their tone can be really exhausting. So people need encouragement and acknowledgement before they're able to really receive and act on advice. And if you're in a situation where feedback is constantly coming in, it really stops being helpful. It, in fact, becomes noise. So if you're collaborating with someone that you might consider a gilded guide, listening means taking time to identify the things that feel most useful and that enable you to take steps right away. So it's not about taking in all the feedback at once, taking in all the opportunities or areas for improvement that you have. It's really thinking about what are the one, two, three things that are really going to be able to move you forward, to move your program, your initiative, or the project forward. And if you think that you might be the Gilded Guide yourself, you can ask yourself, am I listening for and elevating what's working, or am I just moving fast and trying to scan for the things that are wrong that need to be fixed? So before you move into the advice phase or the feedback phase or offering edits and adjustments, think about how you can frame your feedback in a way that builds on what's already strong. So it's a matter of shifting the positioning from a place of inadequacy to potential, and your insights can be better received and advanced. O is for ownership, because navigating difficult relationships isn't just about reacting to someone else's behavior. It's about, as I said at the beginning, owning your role, owning your response, your perspective, and then again, your power. So think about this example. Maybe you're working really hard, you're delivering strong results, you're showing up to meet expectations, and then suddenly there's a curveball. It could be a decision that's made that maybe feels unfair, or it's a request that disregards your time, or maybe one that makes you feel devalued even. I know that a lot of cameras are off, but this is a moment to, if this resonates with you, I welcome a silent nod if you've ever felt this sort of impact from a similar professional curveball. I actually found myself there recently before this conversation, and as I was determining what my response would be, first I gave myself 72 hours just to manage my immediate emotional reaction to the challenge that I was facing. And then I used the love framework. So I asked myself, okay, am I listening? Have I fully heard? And do I fully understand the other person's concerns? Even if I disagree with them, even if I feel like they're not right or I'm being wrong, like, am I understanding where that person is coming from? And then I asked, am I taking ownership? Am I acknowledging the role that I played? And equally as important, am I owning the responsibility that I have to myself to advocate for myself? So owning the part that we individually play in conflict will help us clarify how did we get here? And then ultimately, what can be done next to address the conflict? We're moving quickly. So V is for visibility because our work, our ideas, and our contributions cannot move forward if they are not seen and if they are not heard. So this isn't just about speaking up in meetings. It's really about creating a space for all voices and also claiming your own space so that your value in any situation is understood. This is particularly critical in a professional setting, especially if you find yourself in a room where there are power dynamics that may feel unbalanced, different levels of confidence from collaborators on a team, or even different cultural norms who can shape who gets airtime and perhaps who may be flying under the radar. So I want to explore this one through someone that I'll refer to as the monologue maestro. And honestly, this person is me. Each of these personas that I'm sharing with you today are based off of folks that I've interacted with. And when I ask my husband for feedback on, like, right, what is the challenge that you find is most difficult to deal with me? This is one of the things he surfaced. So I have been a chatterbox since grade one, has been duly noted in every grade school report card. But I will say that it has served me well in high school when I worked as a junior journalist, and now it drives my work in communications. So for people like me, visibility means intentionally making room because we don't always realize how much space our communication style takes up and how we have the tendency and sometimes to suck all the air out of the room before others have an opportunity to either advocate for themselves or position some of their feedback or their insights. So for people like me, it's about pausing and really listening for new perspectives, taking an opportunity to actively invite others in, whether that is to advance an actual project or it is to solve a problem. For others, visibility means using your voice and ensuring that your contributions are seen and heard and understood, even if you might feel like you're in a space that doesn't feel like it was built for you. So this could be in large meetings, it could be, ensuring that you're being visible in one-on-one conversations or even in your written communications. So if you're collaborating with someone like me or another person whose communication style tends to really dominate, don't wait for an explicit invitation to speak because the insight that you have to share is really valuable and it's your responsibility to share them. You can always interject respectfully, or if it is more comfortable for you to follow up in a one-on-one later, that's also great. But you want to make sure that your ideas are being heard and that they're being acknowledged. If you're someone who tends to take up a lot of space, you have a big personality, or you find that your contributions can overshadow others, before you jump in to take that mic or to make another point, you can ask yourself, am I making space for other people? Have I been active in inviting other perspectives into that discussion? So people, in fact, feel like they're being seen and they're heard. You can also look for verbal cues, like are folks leaning in? Are they tuning out? So let me ask you all now, when it comes to being seen and heard in the workplace, whether it is to share your contributions or your challenges, where do you think you typically land? So in the chat box, I would like for you to type give if you find yourself often making space for others, or maybe take if you generally need to be more intentional about taking space to own your own ideas. Grab the chat box really quickly. Yeah, I see some folks in here saying both, give. Excellent. Okay. All right, so now let's move on to the final letter in the framework. Okay. So E is for empathy and action. So that focuses on being clear, being real, being kind. And I hope I've mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that I hope that every person can see themselves and get an actionable takeaway. And so if you haven't yet felt something familiar from some of the other personas that I shared, I hope that everyone understands that this part of the letter is really relevant for every one of us. It's about the version of ourselves that is under pressure. I don't know how many parents are on the conversation right now, but it's the end of the school year, right? We are juggling all the things from a work perspective, from a life and family perspective. And sometimes that might lead us to hold quiet grudges against those who might be requesting more of our time, which already feels limited, which can ultimately lead to conflict. In one of my earlier roles, I learned that not every tough relationship that we're engaged in is, in fact, toxic. Sometimes people are really just moving through a feeling of overwhelm. So the next time that you find yourself being frustrated, perhaps by a collaborator or a team member who you feel like is not meeting expectations, or maybe you feel like you might be the person who's falling short, I invite you to ask yourself, am I expecting perfection from someone who's exhausted? And if you find that that is the case, to be thoughtful about, okay, well, what support can I offer? Or what support do I need for myself right now? And how can I make sure that that need is visible to the team or to the group around me? Sometimes empathy looks like a genuine thank you, right? Especially during challenging times, or being available to listen or to share, or a private check-in. And that's relevant whether or not you are the person who is engaged in a challenging relationship at work or in another space in your life, or if you are observing someone else who may be having an experience or maybe experiencing a challenging relationship with work and you're wondering how to lend support. So starting with the E part of the framework can be really helpful. And in other times, it means we're asking for the same thing for yourself, like asking for a moment of grace, asking for a space to rest from yourself, for yourself, or offering a helping hand. I know that for myself, on a particularly stressful day when the individuals around me, for one reason or another, I might feel like I'm clashing with, or like there's a miscommunication. Sometimes just taking a step back and sitting and literally doing nothing, taking a break from your work to give yourself a moment to breathe, can really help you better respond to conflict. As I mentioned before, taking that 72-hour period that I needed before I responded to a challenging situation was really helpful in taking the appropriate next steps for managing that. And it's not about being nice. So I don't want that to be communicated. It's really about making room for one another, making room for ourselves, honestly, to be human. I also want to point out that there is a difference between a tough relationship and a harmful relationship. So if someone feels like they're experiencing discrimination, whether it is based on race or gender or another part of their identity, that's not just a communications issue, it really is a justice issue. And while the love framework can still be helpful in those moments, not necessarily to solve the challenge, but to really get clear on what's happening, to help you decide what kind of support you might be needing or you might need to offer. That's really where the love framework can have the greatest value. So you could think about it as like, do I need to maybe document some patterns or seek some alternative forms of support? Or maybe even just giving you the courage to use your voice to call out something that feels off. And if you hold power, even if that's informally on a team or more structurally as part of an executive leadership team, it is worth asking, what can I be doing? What am I doing to reduce harm and make sure that others feel safe, feel respected? And I think, as Stacey mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, like making sure that people feel like they belong. So, strong relationships don't require perfection and they don't require us to be in a chipper mood all the time, right? We are human, we have our highs and we have our lows, but they do require intention. So, when we communicate with intention, we create space for trust and for people to be open and for clarity and honestly for leadership, and not just for ourselves, but for everyone that we're collaborating with. So I want you to take just a second to think of one relationship. Again, it could be in your professional life, related specifically to our conversation today, or even in your personal life that you maybe want to shift. And where's some misalignment? Where do you have an opportunity to interject a little bit of love? So before we transition into the Q&A portion of our events today, and we're just at the half hour mark, I wanted to give you an invitation to connect with me by scanning the QR code that you have on the screen. It will take you to where you can sign up for my monthly newsletter where I continue with conversations like this. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and I have a new column coming out on Thursday, and I always share a copy of that with those who are part of my email network. So I'd like to share one final poll before I close out. And that is, what's one thing that perhaps you're walking away with today that feels helpful? So is it part of the love framework or strategy that you feel like you can put into practice right away? Maybe it's a new way to think about how you leverage communication or how you communicate at work. Maybe in one of the personas or in one of the examples I shared, you feel validated, like, oh, okay, I'm not alone in experiencing this. Or maybe there's a moment of encouragement that you feel like you have a little bit of additional insight to address something that perhaps you might have been avoiding. Can you see the poll close? There you go. Okay, good. Some good mix of insight and encouragement. validation, fresh perspective, and a practical move or strategy. So I believe the deck for this conversation will be available to you all afterward. And again, if you're able to connect with me, I'm happy to continue to elaborate on any of these, any part of the love framework that I've shared with you today. I will now say thank you for your time and your attention and stop sharing my screen and pass the mic back to the WIN team. And maybe we can get started on some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Erin, for your insight and your thought-provoking perspective. We really appreciate you being here and presenting to us on this very, very important topic. I think we can all say we learned something from you today, and we will all have some of those fabulous tidbits of your advice circulating around in our heads the next time we come across some of these situations. And like you said, likely not just at work, but in our personal lives as well. I know for myself, taking a step back and giving myself a moment of grace is going to be one of my key takeaways. I have a tendency to give others that grace and not myself, so thank you for that.
Mhm.
Now, I do have a few questions here from the audience, if you're so inclined. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, excellent. So the first one here is it always worth addressing tension directly, or are there times when it's best to just let it go?
Yeah, so addressing tension directly is always a bit of a challenge, I would say for most of us. Letting it go feels like the easier option. But I would say that it really depends on whether or not letting it go actually means protecting your peace, or is it enabling you to avoid a situation? And if it is to help you or enable you to avoid a situation, all it's doing is prolonging your discomfort. Like they say the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So if others are unaware of your discomfort, of your challenge, of the thing that is making work more difficult, it's a problem that can't be solved. So if it is in a relationship with someone that matters, and you think that there is in fact an opportunity for repair, then there's absolutely value in addressing that tension. And if you find that that's not the opportunity, if you feel like this challenge is going to continue to stick and there isn't an opportunity to improve, then I would say that's when boundaries become your best friend, and thinking about, okay, what sort of boundaries can I put around myself, around my work, that allow me to deliver to the level of quality that I want to, without allowing this perhaps negative interaction or challenge to really affect the way that I show up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes you're not sure whether or not it's going to be well received, right, by the other person
Hmm.
and make it worse or not. So it's
Exactly.
definitely a call on, each personality as well. So,
Hmm.
uh, all right, let me see. How can I stay grounded in a toxic work dynamic without emotionally checking out? And I'd like to also add to that, how would you stay motivated, right? So,
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of different things that I would say to that. I would go back to what I mentioned at the end of that first question around setting boundaries. So you can think about it as a micro boundary. When you feel your energy levels, your joy levels, decreasing, take that opportunity to step away from whatever the challenge is, whether it's work or another element, to just reset, right? To step back and to reset. I think another part of the answer that has been really helpful for me, and another thing that I encourage people to do, although perhaps not as regimented as I do it for myself, but that is at the end of every week to really think about the accomplishments that you were able to get through in that particular week, which can be really, it is a form of self-validation, right? Because when you're in a challenging relationship at work, sometimes that impacts our confidence. Like we internalize that and we're like, okay, I'm not doing a good job and it's because of this person or it's because of this situation. So if you are purposeful in taking time to counter that sort of um, negative or discomforting energy that comes to you and focus on all the things that you have done, even if they're very small milestones that have moved you forward or things that you've accomplished, definitely take the time to give yourself that credit because it can be useful as you go into the next week to say, you know what, I did all of these wonderful things, even if it's just one or two things, right? Despite any challenge or any friction that I might be feeling. And that can serve as motivation as you move into your next week.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just had this conversation at work a couple weeks ago about, taking a step back and celebrating the wins, right? Like you said, no matter
Absolutely.
how big or small, really actually breathe instead of continuing to power forward because that's an important concept, like a stop and smell the roses type of concept. That's what I would tell my younger self.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because, challenging relationships can also be, they can also really contribute to burnout.
Yeah.
And taking that time to, like you said, to smell the roses is a counter to that, right? It is the thing that can help you stay motivated. It is the thing that, so one of the things that I will often say is that if it doesn't exist on paper, then it doesn't actually exist in my world at all. And so, literally writing it out on paper is validation that you can see, and that is something you can refer back to over time, right? It's easy for us to forget the things that are working well once we're past them, but having sort of a record to be able to go back and be like, you know what, I actually am trending well, this or this relationship that perhaps was once challenging, like we're making progress in improving the way that we communicate, the way that we collaborate, the way that we work together. There's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, definitely. And to really have like that positive thought to end your day so it doesn't go into your personal life as, we continue to try to have a work-life balance, which is difficult these days, especially with, remote work and all
Oh
the
yes.
travel and everything in our industry. So,
Oh
yeah,
yes.
for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. This is a tough one. So, what do you do if you've already burned a bridge at work and can you rebuild that trust?
Yeah, so I would say, or I would ask, is the burned relationship burned to ashes? What level of burn might we be looking at here? But if I think back to the love framework, I think I would start with maybe well, obviously with the L, but then the O, I think becomes really important. And so that's thinking about like, are you acknowledging the part that you played in this relationship being burned to a crisp or just maybe a little bit charred? So to think about, what is that role? Try to do it without trying to justify your choices or over explaining. I'm actually thinking about my son because accountability and ownership is something that we're talking through. He's 12. He graduates on Thursday from grade six, and ownership is being honest without trying to justify the choices that you have made, which may or may not have been the right choices or the best choices, I should say. So don't try to justify yet or try to explain the choices that you made. Just take a moment to acknowledge, okay, well, what have I done? What might I have done differently that could have, led to a different outcome? And then I would say starting the conversation with the individual where there's perhaps a burned bridge and even just asking and acknowledging like I understand that we are not in the place where we should be. Is this can we rebuild? And if that person is open to that, then I think that it's absolutely an invitation to begin to rebuild that bridge. And also to think about the fact that rebuilding a burned relationship is it's not one gesture that has to happen. It's a series of consistent small moments that rebuild trust in the same way that you build trust from the beginning, right? So if the person is not open to reconciliation and the bit and the bridge cannot be rebuilt, then you have to be okay with that too. But at least you've come to the table, starting from a place of listening and ownership, and understanding that all things, whether they're good or bad, come to an end and can shift, and that you can play a proactive role in creating that shift.
Yeah, yeah. I had somebody tell me one time that explaining is losing. But yes, own and have that visibility and then step back and hope that the other person has empathy and, then of course continue with trust and moving forward and being consistent. It's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. I think back to the example that I shared about the gilded guy, the one that throws the please and thank yous like glitter, right? Like when there's someone who's constantly giving you feedback or advice or adjustments, like at some point your brain just blocks it out as noise. It's like I can't deal, I can't hear it, I can't advance it. And the same is true if you attempt to over explain your behavior. Like at some point, I don't want to hear it. The other person doesn't want to hear it. They're not going to be receptive to it. So you have to be thoughtful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point. All right, so looks like one of our last questions here. So, and this is really important for our group because we do have such a diverse group of people in WIN in general, men and women at all different levels in their careers. And so this question is, how can I ask for what I need if I'm in a junior role and worried it'll come off as demanding?
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like I hear similar versions of that question when folks are thinking through the generational differences that are coming together and to collaborate in the workspace. I think the first thing that I would say is to go back to maybe I think it was the answer to an earlier question. The first question is that the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? And
Yes.
so if you are afraid or you don't speak up, then you're essentially saying, I'm okay sitting in this space and dealing with this challenge and leaving a problem unresolved. I think from a more junior person's or a person in a more junior role, from their perspective, they could think about it, or you could think about it as framing the feedback that you're sharing, or perhaps the noise that you're making, as a demonstration of your commitment to the work, right? Because perhaps there are things that you need that you're not getting. And if the expectation from your mentor, your supervisor, your team leader is that you're delivering your best, and you can't deliver your best with the resources or the connections that you have to ask for it. Like you have to ask for the thing that is going to get you to deliver the value that you expect from yourself and that other people expect from you. It unfortunately is not always offered many times because maybe the resource doesn't exist, or the person who has the power doesn't even recognize that this is something that could be supportive of you. So yeah, as a person in a junior role, I wouldn't worry about coming off demanding. Frame it from the perspective of like, for me to be my best and for me to deliver my best, this is what I need in order to do that.
Yeah, especially with that dominance type of person that you were talking about earlier, sometimes it
Mhm.
feels like it's difficult to get a word in edgewise. And other times, it comes across maybe as a confidence issue, which, we're all working on that, but really are we not getting what we deserve because or what we need because we're not bringing that you know, whatever issue to the table and you know that you're adding value to your position or your team and you want to speak up, but it's trying to find the right time and place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, and sometimes that time and place is sometimes the best way to do it is face to face. Other times, the most comfortable or best place is to start that conversation electronically. In other cases, it's like maybe there's someone on your team or who's part of your network who can serve as a bridge, right? A communication bridge between you and whomever else that other person, may be that you're experiencing challenge with. I think the last thing that I'll maybe say in response to that question is that, and I'm thinking about this also in the context that I sort of share this with my kids as well, is that we're all just kind of figuring it out, right? Like there's no playbook. I mean, there's SOPs, right? But like we're all at the end of the day waking up and trying to make the best decisions in the moment to do our best work, to lead our teams in the best way, to drive growth within our organization. And just because you might be earlier in your career than someone who is a senior leader or executive doesn't mean that there's no space for you or there's no place for your opinion or that you don't have an idea or a way of doing things or a process that is going to contribute value that perhaps isn't already existing just because a senior leader didn't say it, right? And so
Right.
that shouldn't be one of the things that holds you back from sharing what you need because, oh, well, a senior leader hasn't said that this is necessary because perhaps they're in the moment trying to figure out whatever it is that they're bringing to work with them, right, outside of their office space, and they're just not seeing it. So you've got to make that visible for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. This has been so insightful. Thank you so much for being here. And I
My pleasure.
encourage everyone to scan the QR code if you haven't already. We'll have it in that presentation on demand. And I this concludes all of our questions today. And you have any other famous last words here for us?
No, I don't. Other than thank you for allowing me to share this framework. I have been writing a lot and reflecting a lot about just the I'm writing a book about the challenge, right, of navigating all the things, right? There's so many responsibilities that each of us hold on to when we're at work, things that are in our personal lives that we bring to work. And I would say overall, the world needs more love. And if we can start to think about how we use love to counteract some of the challenges that we feel, I think that we will create better teams, better organizations, better communities, and ultimately that will ripple out to build a better world. So thank you for allowing me to share that message with this group.
Yeah, thank you so much. So listen, own, have visibility and empathy. Thank you again so much for being here. And I'm gonna hand it over to Gina to wrap up today's What's Love Got to Do with It session. Oh, she's on mute here. Sorry.
Um, Erin, I just put this in the chat. I love this. Pun intended all over the place. Thank
I'm
you so much
glad.
for sharing your morning with us. Stacy and the whole team has done such a great job of putting this together. And I know that we are going to utilize this both professionally and personally. I know I will. And of course, everybody hop on to the portal. You can grab this on demand and share it and continue to use it. And thanks everybody for joining us today. This was fantastic. Yay!
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, everyone.